Right, so yesterday we started going over the steps of the scientific method. We stopped here after number one, which was ask a question. All right, so you have to first make an observation that will lead you to a question, then that will help you define your purpose. So step number two is to research and gather background information. When we do labs in class, generally you don't have to do this. Generally, I give this to you. But if you were to actually do a full-blown, experiment, you would have to do some research. So in this step number two, again, you should be on page 25 of your notes, bottom of page 25. So you can write this bullet point in there. So under number two, gather information to see what others have studied about this question and summarizing it in an introduction. So oftentimes, as I said, I will have some background information already written down for you at the very top of your lab. And that's really important information because it lets you know what this experiment is going to be about. And a lot of times there are questions in the analysis section or conclusion section that you can actually get right from this background information section. Now, if you were actually doing your own sort of, science fair type experiment, you would have to be a little bit leery of your sources that you use. What are good sources? What are bad? I call them trustworthy and not trustworthy. You do not have to write this down. It'll be italicized, so you don't have to write this down, but I just wanted to briefly mention these. So trustworthy sources would be books, textbooks, journals. These are called, these aren't like diaries or anything like that. Journals would be like scientific journals that you would find online. They're very well reviewed, peer reviewed, and trustworthy. And then reliable websites. So places that have like a .gov, web address or .org, something along those lines. Again, you don't have to be writing this. Not trustworthy sources would be anything that you get from social media. Facebook has algorithms that, basically will keep bringing up things for you to see based on your Google searches, based on the YouTube videos that you watch, based on a lot of other, things that you use social media for. So they really try to cater to things that interest you, and those aren't necessarily always trustworthy sources. So yeah, everybody's got to be leery of that. Blogs or comments made under, websites should not be trustworthy sources either. But again, we're not going to get into a research project right now, but those are just good things to know. All right, then you can turn the page to 26. And on the top number here, we have number 3, which is form a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a testable prediction that attempts to answer a question. So you've asked the question. Your hypothesis is your prediction that helps to answer that. All right. So a hypothesis can be written several ways. I find the easiest way for ninth graders to learn this is to, here, let's write this first. So underneath there, it says, how would you come up with a hypothesis? How do you come up with your prediction? You can either use your research if you had to do that portion of it. You may or may not have, okay? For most of the things that we do in our class, you're not going to have, previous research. A lot of the hypotheses that you guys come up with are going to be relying on previous knowledge to explain your prediction. So you always have to write because. Like, why did you make that prediction? What came to your mind? What do you kind of already know about something that helps you get there? So again, use research or previous knowledge to explain your prediction. So here's the format. I predict, and then I have ... So whatever you think is going to happen in the experiment investigation, and then because. All right. So it's one thing to make a prediction. I think this is going to happen. I believe this is going to happen. You can see you don't have to use the word predict, but I think it's fine. But you have to have that second part of it. So you have to tell me why. What is it that you know of, and that would help you come up with that hypothesis? So we're going to be using an example, kind of going forward here about Gatorade, and a observation that's, you may have made too, that it seems that many runners and athletes drink Gatorade or some form of like a sports drink. So they want to know, does Gatorade help you perform better? Does it help you run faster? So we're going to keep that in mind as we move through some more vocabulary here. All right. So we'll practice making hypotheses in a little bit. So before we talk about a hypothesis, it's good to talk about these two vocabulary pieces here as we figure out what we're going to be testing in our experiment. So the independent variable, I often abbreviate that IV. Your independent variable is what is being purposefully changed. What is being tested? What's the cause? Okay. So what is being purposely changed by the scientist or by you? What are you manipulating? What are you changing? What are you testing? And we are going to refer to this think of this as the cause. So independent variable means that you're changing it on your own, and this is going to be what causes the change. So the dependent variable, abbreviated DV, is what you are going to be measuring. The word variable just means like, what units, what part of the experiment are you looking at? Are you looking at measuring growth, time, number? Those are all different variables that you can have in an experiment, and it entirely depends on what you're looking at. So dependent variable is what is being measured. What data are you collecting as a response? So this is what we call the effect. All right. So what is being measured by the scientists? What data is being collected as the response? So sometimes this is called the response variable as well, a couple different names. The reason it's called dependent is because this variable depends entirely on what you changed for the independent variable. Okay. We'll talk about a couple different examples here. So if you wanted to see if the amount of sunlight affects plant growth, or how the amount of sunlight affects plant growth. Does more sunlight, make plants grow larger, or less sunlight? So what are you purposefully going to change in that experiment? That would be sunlight, the amount of sunlight. What are you going to be measuring? Sometimes you have to look into this a little bit more. We said how it affects plant growth. So that's what we're going to be looking for is plant growth. All right. So now we have this example here, about the middle of page 26, example number 1. So this is the Gatorade one that I was talking about. So you always notice that many runners and athletes drink Gatorade. I want to know if Gatorade makes athletes and runners go faster. So this is our question. This is where, kind of where we want to take these next few examples. So we're going to kind of stick with this Gatorade example so we can, do kind of a whole process here. So first we want to figure out what is our IV? What is our independent variable? All right, so we're going to have to write one down here. So independent variable is, what are you going to change? So if you want to test this, all right, you are going to have to, be testing whether or not some people drink Gatorade and then others drink something else. So you're going to be testing as the independent variable. What are you changing? It's what liquid they drink. Okay, so the type of drink, whether it's going to be Gatorade or water. So we'll talk about why do we have water in the first place? If I just want to test if Gatorade makes them run faster, maybe you kind of have an idea already. But why would I want to need to test water too? We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next page here. So our independent variable, what are we changing? So we're going to give some, runners Gatorade, and we're going to give some runners water. And then our dependent variable is what are we going to measure? All right, so we want to see if they run faster, right? So our dependent variable would be how the time of their run, okay? So we'll put time of run. Now, under example number 1, I want us to also now think of a hypothesis. All right. So I'll help you come up with this one just because it's the first time we're really doing this. So again, we're using that format if and because. And so you kind of incorporate your variables, your independent variable for sure, and your dependent variable, in the, I predict part. Okay. So I predict, I'm gonna, all right. So I predict runners that drink Gatorade will run faster. Okay, so there's my prediction. I predict that runners that drink Gatorade will run faster. And now we have to come up with the because. So what is it that you know of, that's associated with Gatorade based on your prior knowledge? Because I'm pretty sure nobody has researched Gatorade yet. What is it about Gatorade that makes you think that they can run faster? Okay. Maybe you know that Gatorade has something called electrolytes in it. Maybe you think that Gatorade has more of a hydration, formula in it besides water. Maybe you think it has more energy in it. All right. So I'll just go with the electrolytes one. And if you don't know what those are the additional things in there that help to replenish your body as you sweat them out. So I predict runners that drink Gatorade will run faster because it has electrolytes. So this is a big word, electrolytes. All right. Again, maybe you didn't know that. Maybe you've heard of something like that. You would have to make obviously your own one, but with a full class, it's kind of hard for everybody, for us to all come up with one, individual one here that everybody would know. But most of you probably have heard that before. All right. So now we have our independent variable. We're going to be changing the type of drink. Our dependent variable, that's what we're measuring, the time of the run. My hypothesis, I predict runners that drink Gatorade will run faster because it has electrolytes. All right. So now if we look at our next page here, we're going to take a look at a couple other vocabulary pieces here. So under number 4, we are doing test the hypothesis. So we're under number 4 now on page 26. So when you test the hypothesis, you are going to design an experiment and list all the materials that you need, write out each step in your experiment in a what we call a procedure. So if you were designing an experiment from scratch, you are going to want to think of all the materials that you're going to need. If we're talking about the Gatorade example, well, materials can also be people. We need people to run, right? We need Gatorade. We need water. How are we giving it to them? Is it cups? All right. We are going to need timers or stopwatches. We're going to need an area to do it, like a track or something like that. So again, those things are materials and things that you're going to need based on your experiment. Now, the procedure part, and the materials, those are usually done for you. Again, when we're in class and we're doing experiments in here, those parts are usually things that you follow. But if you were doing this yourself, you would be designing both those parts. All right, so a good experiment should always have, you don't have to write this, it's already written for you. So we have 3 vocabulary words here: control group. This is a normal group that's going to be used for comparison. So when I say normal group, this group is not going to have that, that item that you're testing. The independent variable, you're just going to have it with, essentially without that independent variable there. Doesn't mean they don't get anything to drink, but in our case, with the Gatorade example, they'll get water. And I always remember the control group is used for comparison. Okay, so keep in mind control and comparison. That's the very purpose of the control group, is to use it as a comparison. So they both start with, COM, CON, control, comparison. Control group is the comparison group. All right. I need to have this so I know what a group looks like that doesn't have Gatorade. Otherwise, I have nothing to compare it to. Then my experimental group or groups are the group that is being tested and purposefully changed. So this would be my Gatorade group. You can even take this a step further and have one group drink juice. Maybe another group drinks pop or coffee. You could really kind of, branch out and do this in a number of ways and add a couple of different experimental groups. So the group that is being tested and purposely changed. And then the last thing that I want you to write down here is the definition of a constant. Sometimes people get constant and control mixed up. Don't do that. The control group is the group. The constants are things and factors in the experiment that don't change between the groups. Factors that do not change in the experiment, conditions are kept the same for all groups. The reason that you need to keep everything the same across the board, except for the one thing that you're changing, which is the type of drink, is because you want to make sure that that's the only thing that factored into your differences, if you see any. So, let's use that plant example again. So if I want to, see how sunlight affects plant growth, and I have plants that get various amounts of sunlight, that's what I'm changing. I'll put one in a dark room, one that gets 10 hours of sunlight, one that gets 24 hours of sunlight, something like that, okay? And I'm trying to see how it affects plant growth. Well, you need to make sure that a whole lot of other stuff is the same. All the plants should get the same amount of water. All the plants should get the same amount of fertilizer. All the plants should, be the same type of plant. Because if you change any of that, that definitely can affect your outcome. And then you won't know what caused the change. Was it because you didn't give, water to one of them on a regular basis like you did the other two? So constants are factors that do not change, things that need to be kept constant. So there's quite a few things when we think about it. Now, off to the side, it says in the margin of your paper, so this is, to the left of that black line there, right next to where it says for test the hypothesis, write the following info for the Gatorade example. So you don't have to write any of this yet. You shouldn't be writing any of this. Here's what I want you to write. So I just want you to write on the bottom half of page 26 in that margin. So write the word control group. So I want us to list down what our control group is for the Gatorade example. So as I kind of already mentioned and hinted at it, we need a group that doesn't get Gatorade, but still gets some form of hydration. Okay, so we'll say water. All right, now we're making this simple. We're just testing Gatorade, but you could have other experimental groups. All right. So in this case, our experimental group is just the Gatorade, the group that gets Gatorade, but you could add more to it. All right. So again, in our case, we just have two groups. One group's going to get water, one group is going to get Gatorade. Now, constants, these are things that need to be kept the same as much as possible throughout both of these groups. So think of a test, if you're testing out one group and you're giving them water and another group and you're giving them Gatorade and you're having them run. All right, you're having them run. We have to think about things that we need to keep the same between the two groups. All right, so I would say your location of your run should be the same. Okay, so you don't want one group running inside, one group running outside. Probably the age of the people that are being tested, so age, grade. We'll say age of students. Okay. Wouldn't really be fair to compare, fifth grade group that drinks Gatorade compared to a 12th grade group that's drinking water. You probably want to limit the amount of liquid that they are drinking. So both groups should drink the same amount. Okay, so both groups should have the same amount of liquid, whether it's water or Gatorade. You would obviously want them to be running the same distance. So it obviously wouldn't be fair to time one group running one lap around the track and the other one just running, 100 meters. Okay. There are a lot more constants that we could think of. You would want them probably all in similar type of clothing. So they're, not one group has some in sweatpants and they get really hot. You would probably want them to have, the same or similar, body build as far as, you don't want somebody that, can't do it. Or you could have people actually do it in both, one day they do the water run and the next day they do the Gatorade run. So that's something that you can think of too. Or you could do two different groups of people. All right. So I'm going to stop the notes right here. However, I want to show you what you're going to be doing for your assignment today. So you have a sheet that's called, let's pull it up here. So it'll be called Scientific Method, Controls, and Variables, Part 1, and your teacher will hand this out to you as soon as I'm done explaining this here. So it's based off of SpongeBob and his Bikini Bottom pals. They have been busy doing a little research. Read the description for each experiment. There's 4, and answer the questions. So everything that you need to answer the questions is in here, okay? So you really need to read carefully. And then we have, questions like this. What's the control group? Well, read through this information in here. What's the independent variable? We know what that is now. That's what the scientist is changing. Your dependent variable is what are you measuring? So go back and look at those definitions if you need to. Some of these talk about like their conclusion. We haven't quite gotten to that yet, but most of you know what a conclusion is. So it's what should you take away from this experiment? Did the one group was one group affected more than another group? And maybe some other information here to answer. So there are 4 different ones that I want you to do, and all of them pretty much have the same questions. This one does ask about his hypothesis, and then what's the control group? How which group is the control group? Independent, dependent variable, and then conclusions. All right. So this is due on Monday. Make sure you have this done for Monday, as well as all your notes. I will be looking for that to all be finished. And if it's not, we will have to look at consequences for that. So make sure you do your work, and thank you.